Hello there. Today I'm going to be talking about the debut novel by Bobby Hall, better known by his stage name Logic. He's a rapper. I'm not really a fan of Logic, but I do appreciate some of his music. I think he's got some good stuff. I also think he has some bad stuff. Saw this book in the store and I was like, hey, I know that guy, so I bought it, and it sounded interesting. Flynn is stuck, depressed, recently dumped, and living at his mom's house. The supermarket was supposed to change all that. An ordinary job and a steady check. Work isn't work when it's saving you from yourself. But things aren't quite as they seem in these aisles. Arriving to work one day to a crime scene, Flynn's world collapses as the secret of his tortured mind are revealed. And Flynn doesn't want to go looking for answers at the supermarket, because something there seems to be looking for him. A darkly funny psychological thriller, Supermarket is a gripping exploration into madness and creativity. Who knew you could find sex, drugs, and murder all in aisle 9? Basically, the plot of the book is Flynn is a writer. He just went through a bad breakup. He went through a bout of like a depressive period where he just kind of sat around his house and didn't do anything for a long time. But he did end up getting a book deal with a publishing company, and they gave him like $40,000 to go and write a book, and he would get $60,000 after he finished the book, which is kind of crazy, and I don't think that happens very often, where a person who's never written anything before gets a $100,000 publishing deal, but whatever. The quote on the back by Ernest Cline states, "Bobby Hall has crafted a mind-bending first novel with prose that is just as fierce and moving as his lyrics. Supermarket is like Naked Lunch meets One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest if they met at Fight Club." So that sounds pretty good. I mean, it's from Ernest Cline, and I haven't read Ready Player One, but I've heard some mixed reviews, so I don't know how valuable his word is, but it sounded good. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and Fight Club, those are both great books and films. I mean, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest is definitely one of my favorite movies of all time, and I mean, who doesn't like Fight Club? What I didn't realize when I read that quote on the back is that he was not comparing it to those properties. He was literally describing the book. This book is One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest meets Fight Club. Like, exactly. There's nothing original here. There are two really big problems with this book. One is the originality, in the fact that there is none. This book is just a ripoff, and it's not even really like a clever ripoff. Another problem with this book is Logic's ego. It's very much like, this is the first time the guy's ever written a book, and you can tell because it's not written that well. It's pretty lazy. Most of the character introductions are just describing the character by saying, yeah, he looks kind of like, and then naming an actor. So, oh, he looked like Hugh Laurie. She looked like Emma Watson. She looked like Kat Dennings. And that's just every character's description in the entire book, which is just kind of lazy. It definitely feels like he wanted to make a movie but just didn't have the budget for it, so he wrote it down, and now hoping that maybe this will do well enough to spawn a movie. If I was to describe the voice of this book, I would say it's pretentious. It's very clear right off the bat that Flynn is just Logic, which isn't inherently a bad thing, but I never really felt like Flynn was a separate character. He just felt like Logic talking, and frequently they would just stop the action and stop the story, and Flynn would just kind of go off for a few pages talking about whatever, and it just sounded like Logic saying his opinion on the world, which is fine, but it's kind of annoying, and it's not done in a way that seems interesting or in a way that actually like matches with the rest of the plot in any way. It's very much just he starts talking about this because he feels like it, or he wants to talk about it, but he didn't have any other way to talk about it. I don't know. It's weird. This book is very egotistical. I mean, just reading the back, the stunning debut novel from one of the most creative artists of our generation. Okay. Bobby Hall, aka Logic, the Grammy-nominated platinum-selling record artist, quickly established himself as one of the most original young stars in music. Through a streak of hit records, Bobby Hall has cemented his status as one of the greatest MCs at work. being hailed for his lyricism, cinematic storytelling, and inspiring messages of peace, love, and positivity. That's just the back of the book, too. Like, I'm not even talking about what's in here. He thinks really highly of his writing skills, which is stupid because it's his first book he's ever written, and it's not written very well, but he'll go off on these little pages where he breaks the fourth wall or disrupts the illusion of the reality that this book sets up, and he's really cocky about it. Here's an excerpt that'll highlight this. Okay, so he's describing meeting a random guy in the street that looks like Hugh Laurie. He had long bent nose, dark eyes, expressive eyebrows, and wrinkles in his forehead like Hugh Laurie. You know, that guy who plays house. I don't mean like a grown man sitting in front of a plastic tea set talking to a lifeless teddy bear, pretending to be a husband, droning on to his wife about the report his boss demanded to be on his desk by Monday, even though when his boss first mentioned the deadline was Tuesday, and now he would have to work through the weekend. I mean the actor who plays a doctor named House on a television show. No? You don't know what I'm talking about? I can't tell if you don't know what I'm talking about, or if you just got taken aback by my breaking the fourth wall on this page you're reading. Well, damn, hold on a second. Maybe I shouldn't bring up the fact that you're reading a book. If you realize what you're literally doing in this moment, you won't actually be living in the world I painted for you. It's kind of like when you catch yourself blinking while reading, and then start to focus on your blinking rather than the words your brain is trying to process, you know? Oh shit, I've distracted myself. Wait, what was I talking about? And why the hell am I writing my internal thoughts on this page? Doesn't matter, this won't make the final version of the book anyway. But what the hell was I talking about? Shit. Oh yeah, sorry, the weirdo in front of the supermarket. And then he just continues with this description. That kind of came out of nowhere. It doesn't serve any purpose in the story. It just kind of makes him sound like a bit of an asshole. It sounds like something that I would have written in middle school to try and show off how smart I was. It's really, like, edgy. It's very edgy. He's trying to be edgy, and it's not working. There are a lot of moments where it's like that throughout this entire novel, and it gets really old really fast. As in the acknowledgements, Logic says this: after a week of binge reading novels for the first time in my life in my mid-20s, I sat up and said, I'm gonna write a book, to which Christian replied, you can't write a fucking book just because you've been reading them. It was all the motivation I needed. That and other things that he says in this book make it kind of clear that he just is writing this book for fun, and he doesn't really care that much about it. Like, he's just doing it because he thinks it's fun and interesting, and that's okay. Like, I can't knock the guy for that, but that's not what the message of this book is. The message of this book is, I am Logic, I am so good, I can do anything. I can rap, I can make a great novel, and I mean, you can say that as many times as you want, but that doesn't necessarily make it true. It's hard to defend the point that he doesn't take himself too seriously, because the entire book is him just praising himself. Flynn is a perfect character. He's an angel. Nothing he does is wrong. He is a victim of circumstance. He is a victim of mental illness, and there's nothing ever that he intentionally does that's wrong, or he doesn't ever make any mistakes. Everything he does is perfect and works out perfectly for him. I'm going to be going into spoilers now, so if you want to read this book for yourself, or you want to experience it for the first time, or I guess if you haven't watched Fight Club or One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and you don't want me to spoil those, you can skip ahead to this number here. I'll give you a couple seconds to do that. Okay, it's very clear in the first chapter of this book that both the character of Frank in this book is not real, and the character of his dog, I think Bennett, isn't real. And when it first happened, I was like, oh, is he gonna do exactly this? And he did exactly that. There's no twist because it's so obvious, and I can't even really describe why it's obvious, but the fact that it was described as Fight Club on the back really made it hard not to compare it to Fight Club. It's just a ripoff of Fight Club. Flynn is Ed Norton, and Brad Pitt is Frank. It's literally Fight Club, except without the Fight Club. It's a robbery instead of
Project Mayhem.
So part one is set in the grocery store. It follows Flynn and his relationship with Frank. I don't actually know why the dog is even a part of the story. He doesn't do anything other than add to the fact that Flynn is crazy and is seeing things. Frank exists in the character's desire to have an interesting character to write his book about. So he creates this persona of Frank in a way to experience that and create this character so that he knows them well. But I don't know what value having an imaginary dog does. It just makes for some awkward moments where he's like walking around with a leash that doesn't have a dog on it, and it's just weird. I don't understand why. It seems like something that probably could have been cut out. There's a lot of things in this book that probably could have been cut out, and it would have saved a little bit of time, and it would have made the book make a little bit more sense. There's a lot of very loose things that are just kind of around in this book that don't need to exist and don't really further the story. Part 1 ends with a robbery in which Flynn is writing about Frank robbing the superstore, and then it turns out that Flynn was actually the one who robbed the superstore, and so he ends up getting arrested at the end. Part 2 opens up with Flynn waking up in the insane asylum and realizing that he'd been there for 3 years, and he has just been reliving this story of how he got to that situation over and over again. And now he's trying to defeat the Frank in his mind because there's a Frank there, and he's trying to like have full control, I guess. I don't know, he's just kind of antagonistic for no real reason. The ending of this book is hilarious. So he ends up escaping from the insane asylum. Okay, while he's in the insane asylum, he also realizes that his book got published and it sold $9 million in copies, and he is now the most successful writer of all time, and he's so brilliant, and everyone's so amazed by him, and his book's gonna get made into a movie. Hint, hint. And he's like, what? Did my book do that? And it's really just like, alright, we get it, you're amazing, okay. So he ends up realizing, for some reason, he has to go to the supermarket and fight Frank to the death, basically, in order to retain his sanity. So he breaks out of the prison with the help of his girlfriend. I haven't spoken about his girlfriend yet. I will talk about her, don't worry. He gets her to help him escape from the insane asylum. He goes to the supermarket and he has a fight with Frank, and it's just kind of weird. He just kind of like punches. It's just basically him beating himself up like Fight Club. And the way that it ends is the most ridiculous way possible. He's sitting there, and then a bunch of pills, when he gets hit or something, and a bunch of his pills that he's been keeping in his pocket because he hasn't taken any pills in like the 3 years that he's been there, and they're all just full in his pocket. They get knocked up, pills go everywhere, and he thinks to himself at this moment, you know, if I took those pills, I wouldn't be in this situation, and Frank wouldn't exist. He ends up tripping on the fallen pills. He falls over, hits himself in the head, and his concussion, like the way that he hits his head, ends up fixing the problem in his brain, and Frank no longer exists. It's so stupid, and I don't understand, like, what, did he think that was like cool? It's so dumb and anticlimactic. Another thing, I haven't mentioned this yet, but the first like chapter of this book is the ending of the book, which I don't understand why he did that. He's like, if the comparison to Over the Cuckoo's Nest and Fight Club on the back of the book wasn't enough, he has to say exactly what happens in the end. Literally, the first chapter is him killing Frank. So the entire second half of this book is pointless because you know that he wins. There's no mystery. There's a bit of a mystery for the first half because you're like, why does he get in the situation where he ends up killing Frank? But then once you know, it's like, oh, okay. You can stop reading after you read the first part. The second part doesn't really mean anything. He actually wrote, I think he says in the acknowledgements, he wrote them like 2 years apart. You can tell. So the girlfriend character, I haven't spoken about her. It's stupid. It's stupid. There's not much to say. There's also another character, I think his name is Red, that is in the second part of the book, and it's like a sagely wise... he's a sagely wise black man, and he helps Logic, he helps Flynn to overcome Frank, but it turns out that he was actually an extension of Frank the whole time, and it doesn't really make much sense. Yeah, there's a lot in this book that seems like it would have some significance when you're reading it, but actually has none. Like, I'm trying to think of what significance the girlfriend has. She doesn't. Like, at all. She doesn't have any significance in the actual plot. She exists to get in a relationship with him, get hurt by him when she thinks he's cheating on her, but it's actually Frank that's cheating on her, but he is Frank, so he is technically cheating on her, but not knowingly. And then she goes back to him. And she sticks with him for like 3 years while he's in the mental hospital, which is weird. I don't know, it's not a very well-written character. None of the characters are well-written. Yeah, I don't know. That's really all I have to say about this book. It's not good, if I didn't make that clear earlier. Yeah, I don't know, if you are either a fan or you're interested in Logic and his music, check it out. It's not like the worst thing. It's okay to read. Like, it's not painful to read. It's just there's nothing original about it. There's nothing that special about it that sets it apart. And I think there's potential here. I think Logic could come out with a good book if he ever chooses to in the future. But this one, it's a good start. I mean, it's a debut novel. I can't really expect that much. It sucks that it's just a ripoff of a couple movies and other books, but I don't know, that's weird. I haven't listened to, Logic released a soundtrack album alongside this, also called Supermarket. I don't know how that works, I haven't listened to it yet. Maybe I'll talk about that in the future, but I think that's all I have to say now. So, Logic Supermarket isn't that good, but that's just my 2 cents.